thank you very much for making time to share your insights into the future of leadership. But before we go into leadership, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself? Where did you grow up?
Yeah, I grew up in Cape Town. I was born and bred in Cape Town. I grew up in an area which was called, well, firstly, Rylands Estate, which was mainly for Indian community, for Indian families. It was an Indian community. Right. We then moved to an area called Mitchell's Plain, which is a huge community, more kind of coloured community in the Western Cape, and lived there for most of my kind of, teenage years. And a dynamic, very different kind of community, which was made up of a combination of, I guess, all non-white people at the time. And we're talking about, this was round about, I guess, the early 1980s. And I stayed there until probably 1994.
And what was your dream career as you grew up?
Nick, when you're growing up, in which I grew up in kind of, I guess, the apartheid years, there wasn't really something such as a career. Everybody that you knew had the most basic form of jobs, amazing jobs. We had teachers, we had salespeople, we had people working for the municipality. And we were never really exposed to, there was never such a thing or an aspiration of ever becoming a doctor or a lawyer or anything amazing out there. And, you kind of figured that when you would, I guess, matriculate, if you ended up going to college or whatever, you kind of probably end up working as a bank clerk, even with a degree, even with some form of tertiary education. So I grew up in a sense where when I left school, I just started working just because I needed to make a living. I needed to ensure that my family had cash. And I did very kind of basic jobs. But the one thing that, funny enough, that always kind of stood out for me, I just loved advertising. And I think I was more inspired just from what I'd seen on TV, to be honest. And the one thing that was amazing at the time when I was in Mitchell's Plain, there was a fantastic campaign that was driven by BMW and Mercedes-Benz. I don't know if you recall the incident where the Mercedes-Benz went off Chapman Street Drive.
Yeah, I do.
And
definitely.
Yeah, and the campaign was all about about beating the Benz, where BMW came up with a counter ad, and I just thought it was genius. And there was something about that kind of thinking, and that kind of I was intrigued by the mystery behind how you do something like that. But it was so far-fetched. I was a kid kind of walking the streets of Mitchell's Plain, not knowing anybody even remotely close to this world of advertising, and I just let it be. But it was certainly something that had always intrigued me from a very early age.
So Wayne, where did you start your advertising career?
I was kind of first exposed to advertising in the form of Cape Town Tourism. I was a desk clerk there, and Cape Town Tourism was intricately involved in the Rugby World Cup by ensuring that the publicity around the 1995 World Cup was in place. And we had worked with one or two advertising agencies there, so that was my real first connection to going, okay, this is interesting. But the second part, yeah.
If I remember correctly, one of the big games at the 95 World Cup was played in Cape Town.
Yeah, I mean, geez, we had, I can't remember the exact game, but what we had actually done then, we set up these marquees for fans to watch the game in, with big screens and that. So we created a proper festival, a proper, festive environment for people that couldn't attend the actual matches to watch within these big venues, which was incredible. But soon after that, I joined what was then the Cape Town Olympic bid, and we were pitching for the 2004 Olympic Games. And I was in the marketing team there, and it was a magnificent time. It was so far-fetched again, what did we know about the Olympic Games? And to have participated on a global scale on a stage like that was fascinating. And again, I was involved with all the big agencies of the time, working with Ogilvy, working with people, with Hunter Scardus, with a company called Bull Calvert Pace. I started truly understanding the mechanisms behind it. And that was, I guess my dream started becoming more of a reality just through those means. And as the Olympic bid, we never won the bid, but I was appointed by Bull Calvert Pace, which was this upstart agency, and said, would you like to come across? That's essentially how I got into advertising. I thought I was going to stay there for a year and learn as much as I could. But 15 years later, I was still in the same company. But at that point, I ended up being the CEO.
And can you tell us what prompted you to found Duke?
So after the 15 years that I was at Low Bull and having been CEO for a while, I actually said, that's enough, I'm leaving the industry. And I went into the client side and helped launch a financial services company rolling out credit throughout Africa, in Ghana, Uganda, Tanzania, and Kenya. And 2 years in, magnificent journey, I then decided, advertising is my first love. And but I wanted to do it slightly differently. By the time I'd left Low Bull, it was a very, very big company. It became more of a corporate as opposed to an entrepreneurial company that I once joined. And I saw that we could probably add a bit more value to clients' businesses in light of what I had been through, having been a client over the last 2 years. I decided, let's create an agency that did things slightly differently, that never just chased after the awards that the industry is so in love with. But imagine we partnered with clients if we owned their businesses. We have a mindset that whatever you do is to bring value beyond just creative work, but your creative thinking being an integral part in terms of driving business strategy.
And tell me, who inspired you in your early career?
I guess a number of people inspired me. I was very fortunate throughout my career where, when I say my career, it wasn't a career back then, but I always came across people that somehow gave me opportunities. There was even a guy by the name of Gordon Oliver, who was an ex-mayor of ours. He ended up being the CEO of Captour, or Cape Town Tourism back then. And he gave me a bit of a break. It was all these little breaks that added up to things. And I worked with a man by the name of Chris Ball, who was at the Olympic bid. He was our CEO, but he was also the ex-CEO of Barclays. And Chris was incredible to me. I was 21 years old. And, just again, through all these encounters, I drew a lot of inspiration from these amazing, amazing individuals that taught me things beyond just business. They taught me things about the human dynamic and how the world actually operates. And I took a lot of inspiration from that.
Now, Wayne, I believe you're also the Chief Communications Officer for the YPO in Africa. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I sit on a regional board. So the Young Presidents Organization is a global organization of about 25,000 people made up of CEOs under the age of 45. I've been a member for over 10 years, so I joined when I was about 35 years old. And the whole idea is we're trying to promote the value that YPO has to offer leaders throughout the continent. So in South Africa, we probably have about we have 6 chapters. Chapters are made up of CEOs. We probably have about 100 of them per chapter. And it's a leadership learning organization, so we draw experiences from each other, we learn from each other, there's idea sharing constantly, and one of the most magnificent organizations that I belong to, where not only you are involved, but so is your family and your kids. And it's just this constant space where you're drawing on knowledge from people that have been there or that have done that. And it's it's the best education that I've ever received.
And tell us, when looking back over your career, would you say there was a major turning point where things could have gone differently?
Yeah, I've had a couple of turning points throughout my career. The thing that was very difficult for me when I started out, I was 17 years old when I left school and started working immediately. One of the jobs that I had was I worked for attorneys in town. I must have been about 18 at the time, and I worked for attorneys as a messenger, delivering, post from our company that was housed in Rubik Street to the post office in the Grand Parade. And the one particular day I had delivered a package registered mail to the post office, and on the way back, I came back and I was soaking because it was storming that day in Cape Town. And the main attorney came to me, took one look at me and said, "If you call in sick tomorrow, consider yourself fired." And there was no context. She never asked why I'd done it. And I did everything because I thought it was the right thing to do at the time. But it was the manner in which I was being spoken to. It was, it did something to me. I realized that if I never ever wanted it to be spoken to like that again, and to ever be on the back foot like that again, that I needed to up my game. I needed to become something. And that was a big driving force for me ever since.
So what would you say is driving you today?
A number of things, I think with probably that story that I just shared still drives me today. Because the weirdest thing that happens is that as you grow in your career, you come across many of those type of personalities anyway. And many people will succumb to that kind of people, that kind of character. Whereas it's quite simple, where you can beat that system by just being smarter, by being more knowledgeable. And I do a lot of this because, I've got young kids. I've got people in the communities who haven't broken through. And perhaps there's something within me that kind of silently says that maybe if I can demonstrate that it can be done, that we'll have more people.
Okay, so let's talk about the future of leadership. And I know it's a big question, but what does the future of leadership mean to you?
Sure. I can only talk about my experience again, Nick. And, having come from what became a corporate through Lowball, and having, I thought leadership was done in a particular way there, which was, you had an organogram, people sat in certain positions, there were reporting structures, and it was a very kind of, whilst it was everything appeared to be in place, it lacked heart, it lacked soul. What I learned through being an entrepreneur is that there is no organogram. You've got people working for you, with you, and what I've learned is that the future of leadership is all about actually being with the very people that is on your team. It's hands-on. It is doing things together dynamically. And by doing that, you build trust, you build loyalty. Not that is what you're looking for. It automatically just happens that way because you're all in the fight together. You're all breathing the same air all of the time. You've got your finger on the pulse of everything, and everybody else has also got their finger on the pulse because we're talking all of the time. So I think a big part of it is the normal things like trust and that, but it's ongoing communication. It's personal communication. It's not positioning yourself above the rest. And I've certainly learned through that, and it seems to be working in that regard.
So what have you learned from your own journey that you consider most important for building future leaders?
Yeah, again, I think authenticity probably lives within that. Being as authentic as possible. It's if you can show your vulnerabilities to people, it's weird what happens. You know, you become closer. The relationship is far more truthful on both sides. You become non-judgmental, which I think a lot of bigger corporates are all about. To be able to, there's big power players in the corporates, whereas even within corporates, I think that if you dropped your guard slightly, I think you'll be in a better position with the team around you, because ultimately it's the people that make your business work. So I think it's really trying to understand the human dynamic and getting closer to it, and becoming far more educated about that. But only you can teach yourself that.
Now, when you speak to aspiring leaders and maybe even your children, what do you tell them they should focus on for future-proofing their career?
Maybe it comes back to that authenticity comment that I made, but you need to learn, you probably need to learn more about yourself. If you can reach self-actualization as an individual, understanding what is really the main ingredient to happiness, as opposed to chasing after power, which I think is kind of what we always thought it was about, was to attain power, to get to that point, that position of power. I think that's really an old school way of thinking. I think it's more a matter of going, I'm comfortable with who I am, warts and all. And if you're able to get there quicker, I think that, you probably be happier with anything that you do going forward.
Now, let's touch on technology. What would you say are the key technologies or maybe tools of technology that, in your view, will enable and drive the leadership of the future?
I'm fascinated by AI. I'm nervous at the same time in terms of what could happen. But AI is going to play a huge role. I think the Internet of Things is going to play a huge role. Blockchain, I think we've only scratched the surface. And yet I see the benefits of blockchain that can be enormous across certain industries like travel, and even, I guess, from a legal point of view. I also look at robotics. You kind of get to see these clips being sent around about robots doing things, and it's frightening, but at the same time, I think it's going to be playing a much bigger role. I think, and more things to be invented. We haven't even seen it yet. If one considers that certain of the platforms that we work on today were not around 10 years ago. I think that, lots of interesting things are still in the making. And I guess the last one that I can think of, just at the top of my head, is probably the power of drones. I think, again, I think we've only scratched the surface when it comes to the role that drones will be playing in our world.
Now, when it comes to social media, how would you suggest future leaders, aspiring leaders, should go about using social media with their brands?
Social media is merely a platform. It's able to get your message out to various people. I think where people get mistaken is believing that they're communication experts. And, very much, if you're trying to build your personal brand, there still has to be a strategy, a personality that needs to be applied to it. There needs to be, how are you trying to position yourself? So it's still very much the basics of marketing and communication and brand positioning that needs to be done before you just go and speak on these platforms. My advice to anybody that's wanting to do that is get a specialist to do it for you. You take a Donald Trump as an example, or Kim Kardashian. These guys have become experts at it. One could argue, but they're talking crap. No, they're not. They're building their own personal brands through those means. You know who they are. But in my view would be get a proper brand specialist to do that for you.
Right. Now, as a mentor to future leaders, can you maybe share a success story or two where you mentored somebody and that person took your advice to heart?
Yeah, I have one that kind of stands out to me, and it's a bizarre one because I somehow I mentored somebody that was 24 years old for probably 2 years, having thought that it was all about business, wanting to understand how the mechanics of business works and communication, all of that. And what I actually discovered through the process that it wasn't really about that. It was about um, this kid had issues with his father, and was kind of looking for, I guess, parental guidance of some sort, a father figure, I would imagine, because he possessed all the commercial know-how anyway. And what was fascinating through this process was that he was very, very unstable, very insecure, had the most, I mean, amazing brain when it came to academic and technical understanding, but was incredibly insecure. And through a process of 2 years, I guess just through talking, I don't think I could really give parental advice, but it wasn't even about that. I think it was just he needed to hear some of, the journey that I guess that I've been on. Um, he actually just needed an ear and somebody to listen to him. And I saw a new human being blossoming, 2 years later. But throughout the process, every meeting we had, there was certainly progress just from the person himself. So that caught me by surprise, I must say. But it also said to me that it isn't all about, what we think it's about sometimes, which is not just academic and technical skills, but something else, slightly deeper.
And when are there any role models of leadership or maybe books about leadership that you would recommend future leaders should study and learn from?
Yeah, I I guess the best people that I've ever learned from were females, and it would be either my mom, my aunts, elderly people, but mainly elderly females. It's the knowledge, the EQ that they have, in raising families, creating balance, having a much higher pain threshold, I think, when it comes to a number of issues. I thoroughly enjoy being around such people because they teach you different qualities that I think that, again, men in general, I find, don't really possess to that same degree. So I gravitate towards that more so than I do towards proper business leaders that are top CEOs of listed companies. I gravitate more towards the human element. And again, as I say, the older women seem to have that in abundance.
And how can our listeners connect with you? And where should
Sorry, Nick, I can hardly hear you.
Yeah, I'm saying, how can our listeners connect with you, and where should they follow you?
I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter, website, I guess, which is under Duke. So by all means, if they're trying to get in touch with me, they can do so directly via my email address, which is wayne@duke.co.za, and I'll gladly respond when I can.
And last but not least, Wayne, is there one piece of advice that you would really like to convey to future leaders that they should implement in their own leadership?
Maybe all the things that I've been speaking about leads me to be okay with who you are. I spoke about warts and all. I think the minute that you're able to accept that you're not perfect, or that you have insecurities, or you have anything, and you're okay with it, and you're willing to use that to your advantage, that's okay. I think that once you do that, it will allow you to act more freely and become a better leader as a result.
Well, Wayne, Thank you so much for sharing your insights into wisdom, into the future of leadership, and showing us what is possible through your story, through your role modeling, and I think through your care for the world and your children and the next generation in general. So thank you very much.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much, Nick. Thanks for having me.